The night Dean Martin broke the rules. Dean Martin stopped singing in the middle of That's Amore. Not because he forgot the lyrics. Not because his voice failed. He stopped because, in the back of the room, a quiet injustice was walking toward the exit, and for the first time in his Las Vegas career, Dean Martin decided he would not look away. The orchestra played on for a few confused seconds. Then the music collapsed into silence. 2,400 people froze in their seats. Dean stood under the lights, microphone hanging loosely in his hand, staring past the tables and champagne glasses toward the rear doors. Security guards were escorting an elderly black man out of the room. No struggle. No protest. Just quiet compliance, the kind learned over a lifetime. The King of Cool was about to do something that could end his career in Las Vegas, or redefine it forever. To understand why this moment mattered, you have to understand Las Vegas in 1962. Back then, Vegas wasn't a family destination. It was an adult playground built on money, glamour, and unspoken rules. The Strip sparkled with names like the Sands, the Flamingo, and the Tropicana, but beneath the neon glow was a truth everyone knew and no one dared to say out loud. The city was segregated. There were no signs that said whites only. Nevada didn't need them. The rules were invisible, and absolute. Black performers could headline sold-out shows, but they couldn't eat in the hotel restaurants. They could bring audiences to their feet, but they couldn't sleep upstairs. They could entertain white crowds for hours, but they couldn't gamble afterward. Sammy Davis Jr. knew those rules. So did Nat King Cole. So did Lena Horne. They were stars on stage, and outsiders the moment the curtain fell. When the applause ended, they exited through the back door and drove across town to the only part of Las Vegas that would accept them. Casino owners wanted black talent. They just didn't want black people. And everyone played along. Everyone, except Dean Martin, was running out of patience. Dean understood prejudice long before he ever wore a tuxedo on stage. He grew up in Steubenville, Ohio, the son of Italian immigrants. His father was mocked for his accent, his name, for being different. Dean remembered the slurs, the quiet anger, the way his father had to work twice as hard just to be tolerated. That past shaped him. So did his friendship with Sammy Davis Jr. This wasn't a business relationship, it was brotherhood. Sammy stayed at Dean's house. They talked late into the night about race, about humiliation, about the absurd cruelty of Vegas rules. Dean watched Sammy receive standing ovations, then get escorted out like he didn't belong. Still, Dean stayed quiet. He had a family, a career. In Vegas, you didn't make waves. Until one night, September 12, 1962. Minutes before showtime at the Sands, Dean was told security was removing an elderly man from backstage. His crime? Being black in a place he was no longer cleared to be. The man's name was Willie Hayes. He had played piano at the Sands when it first opened in 1952. He had served in World War II. He had helped build the very entertainment scene that now erased him. And he was being walked out like a problem. Dean watched it happen, said nothing, then stepped on stage. Halfway through That's Amore, he saw Willie again, this time being escorted through the audience itself. A message. A warning. The crowd laughed, drank, applauded, unaware. Dean read the note handed to him from the wings. Finish the show. Don't cause trouble. Dean looked at Willie, then at the crowd. Then he made his choice. He stopped singing. The silence was instant, heavy, uncomfortable, undeniable. Dean walked to the front of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, he said calmly, we have a situation. He told them who Willie Hayes was, what he had done, what he had given. And then he asked the question no one else would. Why is this man being asked to leave? When the casino manager tried to delay the conversation, Dean shut it down. I don't perform in places that treat people this way. He turned to leave the stage. That's when the math changed. The manager stopped him. Willie could stay. Apologies were made. The rules bent, not out of morality, but necessity. Dean returned to the microphone, smiled, and finished the show. But something had already changed. The applause that night wasn't for the music. It was for the stand. Dean never bragged about what he did. He dismissed it as nothing. But Sammy Davis Jr. said it best. Dean didn't just stop a show that night. He stopped pretending he didn't see what was happening. Las Vegas didn't change overnight. Laws were still years away. But for Willie Hayes, sitting front row for the rest of his life, and for Dean Martin, the silence was broken. And sometimes, that's how real change begins. When the applause finally faded and the music returned to the room, many in the audience didn't fully understand what had just happened. They felt it, the tension, the shift, the strange sense that they had witnessed something bigger than a concert. But only a few truly grasped how rare that moment was in Las Vegas of the early 1960s. Dean Martin finished the show flawlessly. He joked, he smiled, he held his pauses with the same effortless precision he always had. From the outside, it seemed as if nothing extraordinary had taken place. But backstage, the air was different. Heavy. Uneasy. Casino executives avoided his eyes. Musicians spoke in hushed voices. Everyone knew an invisible line had been crossed. When the curtain closed, Dean didn't leave the stage right away. He lingered for a few extra seconds, looking out at the room as it slowly emptied. Tables with half-finished drinks, crumpled napkins, the low murmur of departing conversations. Everything looked familiar, and yet somehow changed. As if the stage had finally told the truth. Willie Hayes stood nearby, unsure where he belonged. He wasn't a man accustomed to attention. Most of his life had been spent in the background, behind a piano, in the shadows, supporting other people's spotlight. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from memory. Dean walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. "You reminded them who they are tonight," Willie said quietly. "No," Dean replied. "I just reminded them who you are." The words were simple, but to Willie they meant more than any apology he had heard in a lifetime. Later that night, Dean was called into a meeting with casino management. The conversation was cold and brief. Contracts were mentioned. Reputation. Difficult times. Dean listened calmly. He had already made his decision. "If basic respect is a problem," he said as he stood to leave, "then the problem isn't me." By morning, the story had spread across Las Vegas faster than news of a jackpot. Musicians talked about it backstage. Dealers whispered between shifts. Some called Dean reckless. Others called him brave. And a few, for the first time, questioned why things had been the way they were for so long. Nothing changed overnight. No laws were rewritten. No policies were erased. But cracks began to form. Black performers were escorted through back entrances less often. Exceptions quietly appeared. Doors that had always been closed stayed open a little longer. Small changes. The kind that signal something larger coming. For Willie Hayes, that night became a final return to the past, and an unexpected gift to the future. He was no longer a ghost in a city he had helped build. He was part of its story, and that story could no longer be erased. For Dean Martin, the night marked a line he could never step back across. After that, he was no longer just a performer who sang and walked away. He began using his name differently, quietly, carefully, but with purpose. Years later, when asked about that evening, Dean brushed it off. "I just paused a song." But those who were there knew the truth. It was a pause made of decades of silence. And sometimes, one pause is all it takes for the world to begin to change.